was that I wanted to share with you my story of how I got into speaking, because I am a professional full-time speaker. And that's when the audio went out. I mean, the audio didn't work. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to do it real brief here. Let me share my screen again, because this is part of my story. Because today is actually a very special day. So I'm glad you all are with me here. Okay. So this is my story of who I am and how I got involved. This is me with my dad. I was born in a one-room cabin with no running water or electricity, and I was potty trained in an outhouse because my parents were hippies. I was raised very, very rural in the middle of nowhere in Oregon, and we were also actually very, very poor. In fact, this is the house that I grew up in. So we can't all live in that kind of lap of luxury, but there it was. And that was actually the big house that we moved to when I was 3. That was 800 square feet, where all 5 of us were raised. And the area that we lived in, it was very rural, and there was a lot of poverty. It had over 80% poverty rate. And for any of you who grew up rural, you know that a lot of times sports are really important in small towns, and there's really no arts. My older sister and my younger brother were very, very athletic. In fact, they're both Marines. And I didn't get that gene for some reason. I just really didn't ever have that competitive spirit. So I never really connected with much at school. And it really wasn't until my junior year in high school. And what had happened was I had an hour-and-a-half bus ride to and from school each way every day. And I would get very bored, and I would make up stories in the back of the bus. And I didn't know what acting was. I didn't know pop culture. We didn't watch movies. I didn't know anything. And this teacher had come from Chicago, and she purposely chose our town because she wanted to find a small community that she could bring the arts to. And she found us, she came. And so she heard about me in the bus, and she asked me if I had ever thought of acting. And so I hadn't. So she took me to a competition. She drove me 3 hours one way to do my very first monologue, The Diary of Anne Frank. And I performed it. And one of the judges pulled me aside and said, "Hey, Stacy, how long have you been acting?" And I said, "Today." And that's when she told me that she ran this program where they took 60 students from around the world, and they interned them for several weeks in the summer at this world-renowned theater. She invited me to apply, and I got in. And so my very first experience with theater and acting and performance in the arts was just amazing. I loved it. The next year, my senior year in high school, that same teacher took me to a second competition, and I won a full ride scholarship to study theater. And this is me and one of my acting things. I did very well. I did a lot of theater. I started doing film. I started doing commercials. And so I really had become, well, I'm so sorry. Oh, my daughter see, this is why she's here. You can just interrupt me. So you can just talk, Catherine. Oh, yeah, I can. Thank you. See, this is why she's here. This is why I have her. Okay. Slave labor. No, I'm just kidding. So I started doing, so I did really well. I married my first husband. There's been 2. And I was going to get my master's in theater, but he decided he didn't really like the acting thing, so I didn't act for 15 years. Instead, I had 2 beautiful children, and I started a children's theater school, and it was called the Academy of Children's Theater, where I taught kids the arts. It's actually down in Colorado Springs. It still goes. It's done very, very well. My partner, Lynn, who owns it now, it's wins Best of the Best every year. So that was a positive, but I did miss acting. In the meantime, I started writing scripts a lot for other people, and YouTube was just starting to become a thing. I thought it was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen when YouTube first came out. It's like, who would want to watch stuff out of other people's houses? It totally creeped me out. But I started writing scripts for other people for YouTube or to perform, and they came out funny, and I don't know why, but they did. And so let me go to the next one. So here's why today I'm doing the webinar, actually. Today is a special day because I was raising my kids. I was doing the children's theater school. I stepped on a rusty nail. And it wasn't tetanus and all of that. I got an infection and I almost died. And so that's part of my story that I share, is that I've almost died 5 times over several years. I've had major surgeries. I've done weeks and weeks of IV antibiotics, like to the heart, and just had a real struggle of journey and loss through all of that. I was diagnosed with PTSD from almost dying so much, and have journey of depression and all of that. The reason today is a special day is that happened stepping on the nail 12 years ago today. And I was teaching when it happened, because I was teaching a musical theater camp when I stepped on the nail. And I thought, you know what, today I want to teach again what I've learned over the last 12 years. So that's why I'm very glad that you're here with me. So this is part of what I share when I talk, is part of that journey with the PTSD and depression and losing everything and everything that I went through in that journey. It's been good since then. This is my son, Luke, and this is my daughter, who's right there helping me. In fact, she found out last night that she just got accepted into Portland State University. So she'll be studying to be an art therapist starting this fall. So congratulations. So here's how I stumbled into speaking from there. During that process, I stumbled into stand-up comedy because I was writing those scripts and they were coming out funny. And finally, somebody said, "Can you perform one?" And so I did. I didn't know what stand-up comedy was. I had no idea it was a thing. I'm in my mid-30s at this point. I performed it and like people loved it. And so I kept getting asked to do that. And I ended up winning a competition, Colorado's Got Talent, for their stand-up, for the comedy section. And I started getting hired. So my very first job, now I was always a starving actor, and my very first job, somebody had seen me. It was a company. This lady had seen me, and it was her dad's company, and it was a contractor's company, and it was the holiday party, and they wanted to hire some entertainment to come in, and they were going to pay $350. Now, I didn't even know that you could make $350 in an hour. I was like, who does that? And so I did it. And then word got out and I started getting hired because I was a clean comedian. And there's not very many of us. So, and I'll talk about that and remind me, Catherine, when we talk about our niche and what it is that makes us marketable, the fact that I'm a clean comedian and I'm female, there's so few of us. That's why I kept getting hired. Well, I discovered this comedy thing and I was making money at it a little bit. And so I just started trying. I just started performing all over. I did do clubs, but I did a lot of really bad gigs, like driving to the middle of nowhere in Nebraska in the winter to, do like a thing at the Grange. Like I just wanted to learn and to do the best that I could. But during that time, people started hearing of my story, and I was going through it at the time of, the PTSD and everything that came with that. And so they would ask me, they would say, "Hey, we want you to come and be funny, but can you also talk about how you got through everything you went through?" And so then I became basically a comedian with a message. That's how I was marketed. It was 2016. I got hired at a conference to do comedy for it. And I remember they paid me $1,500. I was like, what? And I was so excited. And I drove all the way to El Paso, Texas, though. But she's ended up being a great friend, the lady who runs these conferences. So I did that. And one of the speakers who was there pulled me aside after and he said, Stacy, you are not a comedian. You are a speaker. And he goes, how much do you make headlining comedy? And I said, well, if I'm headlining on a good day, it's $500. And he goes, no, add a zero if you remarket as a speaker. And I was like, what? He goes, starting out right away, it's $5,000. That's your value right now in the marketplace. And I didn't know anything about speaking. I didn't know there was a speaking industry. I didn't know how to be a professional speaker. I just knew, I was like, I could do the same thing and make $5,000. How do you do that? So he told me about this thing called National Speakers Association, which I will talk about. I didn't know what associations were. We'll talk quite a bit about that later because that's a huge speaking market for you all. So I joined this National Speakers Association and they talked about professional speaking. I didn't know that there were state chapters, and it took me about 6 months to figure that out. I finally went to the Colorado chapter. I walked in the door. I learned all this stuff about speaking. And I remember I came home and I said, I don't know what this is, but this is what I'm meant to do. And I'm going to take the next 2 years and I'm going to learn everything I absolutely can. I'm going to treat it like my master's program because I had never gotten to get my master's. And that's what I did. I've performed and failed so much, which we'll also talk about, and just tried so many things. 2020 was going to be my best year ever. I had a lot of bookings. In fact, I was at the convention center in Denver for the Meetings Industry Council Conference, which is a huge conference for meeting planners. And that was the last thing held before they turned the convention center into a makeshift hospital. And I'm at the downtown Hyatt Regency where they had put me up for the night. And I just started getting the calls one after the other. All of my events for 2020 gone, except for 2. And so I then tried to get a real job. And and here was the thing with getting a real job. This is where I knew I was meant to speak, was people, they'd say, well, why do you want to work here? And I thought, I don't want to work here. I want to be speaking. I didn't say that, but apparently they got the vibe, because I'm thinking as soon as the world opens back up and I can get back out on the road and speak and help people, that's what I'm doing. I never got hired. Nobody touched me. So that was the end of that. But things have opened back up and I've been busier than ever, thankfully. And so that's kind of my journey of how I got here. It's just been a long, long road of lots of failure, lots of practicing, lots of trying, and lots of learning. So these are just some shots. So every speaker wants a shot like this. This is so funny. Every speaker wants the shot of the audience in front of them and then from the back. And I was performing at this place, was speaking, and the photographer came out and I didn't know they had one, and he took just one photo, but I'm bending over. And so my rear is enormous. So I still kind of use the photo, but it just embarrasses me every time I look at it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to have it like edited down. Okay.